Welcome or welcome back to Solidarity on the Bench, a podcast for 20-somethings by a 20-something. I'm your host, Katie Yu, and on this podcast, we talk about everything and anything with a focus on mental health and personal well-being. New episodes every Tuesday at 11 a.m. PST. I am joined here with Bonnie. She is a content creator, traveler, wellness girly, just someone that I have admired for a really long time. Like, literally looks like straight out of Pinterest almost. And I'm excited to talk to her about like friendships and community, especially since she mentioned you mentioned to me that you kind of like 2023 was your year of community and female friendships. And so I'm very stoked to have you on the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This is my first podcast as a guest, so I'm really, really excited.
Well, I feel very honored that you're here right now. But for the people who don't know you, could you give me a brief overview of who you are and what you do in the online space?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Bonnie, and long story short, I'm an adventure travel creator, and my dream is to see the world and bring people on my journey and hopefully inspire somebody along the way to go see the world for themselves because I believe that there's more to life than your hometown and a 9 to 5. I think travel is a huge part of my life, but I really didn't start in that space. Heck, I honestly didn't even start posting to gain a big platform, especially in travel. It was just for the fun of it. But then the more I shared about my digital nomad life, my friendships, just things I was doing on a daily basis as a 23-year-old girl. And then when I got broken up with earlier this year and starting my healing journey with that, I realized that what I'm going through in my life, a lot of other people are as well, or they can relate to, or they aspire to be like. So it eventually just slowly snowballed into this platform where I try to live my life to the fullest, and then I make fun content and hope that it encourages and helps better somebody else's life.
Yeah, and I have to say, as that 23-year-old who looks at your life and feels very envious of all of the travels that you've been able to do, it definitely has inspired me to want to travel more. As we were kind of talking about, I now live in London, and so like the train system, come on, like I just need to get out more and get out of my comfort zone a little bit more and travel. So thank you for inspiring me with like everything that you're doing, and you being you is inspiring to people like me.
Well, that's awesome to hear. Like, I feel like a lot of times, sometimes, and maybe you can relate to this as a creator, when you're making content, you're like, I don't even know why I'm doing this. Is anybody watching this? Is this helping anybody? But when you hear somebody say, like, it has affected my life in whether a small way or a big way, you're like, wow, like what I'm doing, like, I'm doing my job right.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Absolutely. So, in the name of solidarity on the bench, something that I'm implementing with my new guests is asking everyone a question. And this is mainly to show everyone that, in like recovery is scary, asking for help is scary, but everyone around you is doing it. And there's a lot of shame and stigma around that. So, I'm going to ask you, when was the last time you asked for help?
Oh, this one's a good one. We're starting off with like the bomb questions, Katie.
We
um,
just have to start off strong and then we'll kind of taper back down into the female friendships in the community. But in the
I
name
like
of
it.
solidarity on the bench, like we have to talk about mental health first and foremost.
I like it. Um, the last time that I had asked for help, this was when I had just gotten my heart broken in April. It was probably like it was the toughest breakup of my entire life. And I know I'm 23, but like I only have 23 years of experience to speak from. And I knew that I wasn't in a good place at the time, and I knew how bad my headspace could get, and I did not want to let myself get back to that headspace that I've previously experienced. So immediately the first thing I did was I told my best friend, I was like, "Hey, can you just please like be my accountability partner? And right now I'm not in a good state. Just check in on me, like ask if I've eaten that day and ask if I've left the house that day. Like just two things from you that are super duper simple. And there are going to be days where I don't answer you, or there are going to be days where I don't want to talk to you and I just want to be in like my bed in a cocoon and not, like, be a part of life. But just ask me those two questions because I know that if somebody asks, then I feel more inclined to like leave my bed, leave the house, go eat something, like take care of my body." And she was that person for me. And it wasn't just like a one-time thing. It's kind of like a over time thing, right? Uh, Over the days, over the weeks, and then over the months still. Like I still have friends that will call and check in and be like, "Hey, how's it going? Hey, have you gone to the gym today? Hey, have you, gone to watch sunset today?" Which is one of my favorite things to do. And I think having people know where your head's at, is a little bit less scary for you and a little bit less scary for them if all of a sudden you're not responding or if you're not your normal self. Um, it just helps you out, but also helps the people that care about you out as well.
I think there's also something to be said about like the power in the statement of you asking for help is like, can you help me with this specific thing? Can you use these phrases and do it every single day? And it's less daunting than, I need help, but I can't vocalize or verbalize what that means to me right now. And so it's a lot easier for people to show up for you in a way that serves you when you have that language behind that.
I agree. I think a lot of times it's hard for people to help when they don't really know how to help, especially when it comes down to something that is a little bit tougher to navigate, like mental health, right? The way that I need help looks very different than maybe the way that you need help versus somebody else that needs help. And I feel like that also comes down to how well do you know your body, how well do you know your brain, and how you feel your emotions and how you go about scary situations, which helps you kind of say that to somebody else and put it in words and actions for somebody else, because people do care about you and people want to help, but when they don't know how to help, it's frustrating for them, and then in turn it makes you frustrated because you're like, you're supposed to love me, like why don't you know how to help me? So it's kind of like helping them meet you in the middle a little bit.
I agree with basically everything you said, and kind of touching on like that one friend who was really there for you in April, it kind of kickstarts our conversation on female friendship because you said, this is your year of female friendship. So I kind of want to talk about like how did that happen? Did you do anything specific? And also what does female friendship mean to you?
Yeah, let's start off by saying that female friendship means the world to me because I didn't grow up with a lot of girlfriends. I was a huge tomboy growing up, played like all the sports, and I was just like, I don't want to play with the Barbies. I don't really want to like talk about girly things. I just want to like get dirty and like, do all the boy things. So I never really had strong female friendships growing up, and I didn't I would see them in the movies. I'd see them on what, like Tumblr and social media and all that, but it
Mhm.
was like, okay, well, is that like, it just seems too good to be true, and it doesn't seem possible for my worlds because I just don't feel like I fit in that space kind of, but I've always kind of wanted it. Hence why I was part of a sorority in college. Did I gain the strong, female friendships that a lot of sorority girls do get when they're in college? No, I didn't. Um, but and I was like, is there something wrong with me? Is there something like that I'm just not understanding? Because I was like, everybody around me seems like they have those awesome girlfriends, and I don't have that, and I don't know how to navigate it. And so, where it all started for me is January of this past year. Well, let's backtrack a little bit more. I had met my best friend Zoe, when I had moved out to Maui, and she had just randomly commented on one of my TikToks. Like 3 months into my me moving there, she had just moved out there as well, and then we ended up hanging out, and then we just started hanging out every single day, and then we just clicked really well, and then that was my girl. Like it's like a when you know kind of situation.
Mhm.
So she was my ride or die, right? But that's one person. And then January of this year, me and my ex at the time, we were on a break, right? And we were supposed to be going to Kauai together, this the next island that I've never been to and I've heard really great things about. And I'm like, well, if me and him aren't gonna go now, I still want to go. I'm gonna take Zoe, but it's too expensive to be traveling there as a, under 26-year-old because driving a car is expensive there, renting hotels, all this stuff. So we
Mhm.
ended up just putting it up on TikTok and saying, "Hey, we're going here. We like to do these things. If you want to come, like we are looking for 2 to 4 girls." And then that TikTok kind of blew up, and 100 girls DMs me and they're like, "I'm willing to come from Wisconsin, from New York, from wherever."
Wow.
Which was really, really
Wow.
cool, but also like overwhelming because I didn't expect it to get like that. And then I eventually like talked to a lot of girls, went through a lot of people's profiles, and I ended up just like picking 3 girls that lived on another island in Hawaii, on Oahu, because it just made the most logistical sense. I was
Mhm.
on Maui at the time with Zoe, and if we're flying somebody in from New York, that's such just like a hassle, and it's jet
Mhm.
lag and everything. But if it's girls that are also already in Hawaii, then it's like, okay, we can all just take a 30-minute flight over, meet up, and spend a week together. Um, and I don't know if this is, the universe just saying, like, finally, here are some girls that are your girls for life, but that's how it seems like, because immediately I clicked with those girls there, and then now these girls are my best friend. Um, so that's kind of how it sparked my year of female friendship. It sparked in January in Kauai, and then I have very similar stories that kind of snowballed in, June and July when I went to Alaska, and I also booked that trip with a girl that I'd met online, and now she's a lifetime friend as well. Um, so feel like I'm going on a rant a little bit here,
No,
but it
keep
started
going.
in January, and I feel like that was just the theme of that year starting in January, that like this is your year for girls. And I didn't have that for 23 years, and now that I've had a taste of it, it's like I don't want it to be any different.
I posted something very recently, a reel that blew up, which was talking about girls who didn't have their girls and didn't have their community. I know that for me as well, like not having my girls or feeling like I never had that friend group to do those, what you're saying, like Tumblr, Pinterest things. It made me feel like I was also doing something wrong. So everything that you were saying was definitely really resonating with me. I feel now, especially like with my move to London, that I'm not struggling as much to connect with other people and connect with other women especially, and, um, it may just be because I was in the wrong place for 23 years. It may also be, that that in my alone time, I was able to kind of do a lot of soul searching and be the type of friend that I wanted to have. And so then, like, it's being reciprocated a lot in friendships. It could be a lot of different factors, but I also feel like, 2023 is my year of having female friendships and like girlhood. And like, I'm realizing, they're not making it up. Like, when you have it, it is so incredible and you never want to let it go.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and it's funny how, like, was it this year or was it last year where, like, Barbie came out and all the
This year,
girlhood
yeah.
things. Yep, all the girlhood things, and it just seems like for a lot of people, I know not for everybody, but, like, this year was, like, a theme of girlhood, and, I feel like people are a lot more. I don't know if you follow along with, like, the Call Her Daddy podcast or whatnot with Alex Cooper. She's been doing these massive, like, shows and stuff, and
Mhm.
she'll kind of promote it in a way where it's like, if you don't have anybody to go with, like somebody just like just leave a comment and say, hey, like I'm in this city, I have nobody to go with, who wants to go? And 100 other girls will comment the same thing. And then
Mhm.
people just end up meeting up and then going to the show together. And of course, you're not going to click with everybody you meet, but like there's ought to be one person, there's ought to be two people that you remotely feel like, oh, wow, I have some common ground with you and I'd love to hang out again. And that's honestly how friendships begin. You just need kind of that like beginning moment. It's almost like going on a first date with a
Mhm.
romantic relationship, but in this case with a girl.
Yeah, and going off of that, one of the questions I wrote down was, "What does connection mean to you?"
I think connection is one of my top priorities in my life right now, especially being someone who is pretty much always on the road, and my life is very here, there.
Mhm.
So when I feel that deep connection with a friend or, with a stranger or whatnot, um, I tend to I've realized that I tend to treasure that and hold on to that a lot more than I had used to before I had gone on this whole on the road lifestyle situation.
Mhm.
Because before I was kind of in one place. I was in college in Boston, then I was on Maui, for a year and a half, 2 years. And you almost take things for granted because you're like, okay, well, next weekend we can go play volleyball if this weekend doesn't work. Oh, like I'm so tired today, I don't necessarily want to, go hang out or whatnot. And that's totally fine. But I think when I've gone on this more on the road lifestyle, you're not always going to see that person again. Your time is very
Mhm.
limited with that person or that group of people. So when you have hangouts, it's a lot more, not intense, but you're not gonna be on your phone as much. You're not gonna be as dilly-dallying as much. You're gonna wanna spend as much time and, like,
Mhm.
intensify that connection as much as possible because you know that your time with that person at that moment is limited. Um, so I wanna say that connection is not easy to come across, but when I do come across it, it's like it's more than $1,000,000 to me because I know that down the line, that friend, that person, we might not always we 99% of the time don't live in the same place, but eventually we get to, meet up somewhere else in the world and continue on our memories and our stories, or they get a visit, I get to visit them. We get to catch each other up and like on each other's journeys or on each other's lives via, I don't know, social media, text, whatnot. But I think long story short, connection is just super, super important to me.
Yeah, and what I was hearing is like there's this piece of intentionality as well. When you were saying, you're not on your phone, you're you recognize that this may be like one of the only times you're going to hang out, so you're making the most of it. And I think that that mindset should be applied, to life. And I you would probably agree, like as a travel person, is like you need to be present in every single moment, especially since you're always on the road. Where you are yesterday is not where you're going to be tomorrow, and so you want to soak up all of that and make as many memories as possible and be with the people who make you feel good and kind of like be chasing and not that this is a negative thing, but, like, you're going to be prioritizing the people and the experiences that make you feel good, and you're not going to be thinking about, the ones that are not gonna make you feel good, and I think there's something about being on the road and being able to travel that really hones I don't know what I'm trying to say right now. But,
No,
like,
you're going on the right track here.
you're able to, like, put less pressure on everything and also be more intentional with everything that you do. Like, the people that you're seeking, the, connections you're making, and the places you're going to. There is just this underlying theme of intentionality that is applied to friendships, and I don't think that I applied that, earlier on, especially, like, in college when I was just like, "I don't have my people," but I was like, "But I wasn't being intentional about connecting with the people that I truly wanted to connect with." Like, I always talked about friendships of convenience because 'cause you're in the same place, you have the same routine, you're in the same major, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that is a good friendship that sets your soul on fire, and I think in college, I realized that in one place, maybe you can only find 1 or 2 of those people and 1 or 2 of those connections, and, like, you don't need to spend your life chasing that type of connection with every single person because it's not gonna happen, and so really prioritizing it when you have it and being intentional with the people and the places and the things that make you feel good is kind of the theme and the underlying thing that I was listening to you talk about and was helping me reflect on as well.
Yeah, you're right. I feel like whether you are, in a hometown or you aren't living this like crazy travel lifestyle, but it's like you have to know and be okay with not every single person you meet is gonna give you that like my heart is on fire connection, right? Similar alongside to, love comes when it's the most unexpected. I feel like that goes along the same lines with great friendships too, right? I'm not going into the first interaction with every new person that I'm meeting with an intention of like, I'm gonna make you my best friend. That's never the situation because I feel like, first of all, that's a little bit silly. Number two, it's just you're putting so much pressure on yourself and also the other person, whether the other person knows it or not. So I feel like as long as you're just genuinely yourself, and I know this sounds so cheesy, but like it's the truth. When you show up as yourself, the people that are meant to stay will end up staying, right? The people that aren't meant to be in your life for, forever or for a long time will eventually weed themselves out, whether it's because your personalities don't match up. And that's totally fine. That doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. That doesn't mean that there's something wrong with that person. It's just it's not there. But I feel like as long as you show up as your full authentic self and that friendship is meant to be, the universe is going to make that happen. You just have to give it a little bit of time.
I love that, and I was while you were speaking, I was, like, nodding my head, soaking it in as well, like, I think that, friendships, especially, like, the inability to find some and then the shame that comes with that, and then eventually being able to find some. Like, people don't necessarily talk about that shame and that first part enough, and I love how, like, we were able to kind of touch on that before moving into this, like, well, what do I do now that I have them? How do I connect with people? And I want to open up, like, I have questions from the community because this, as I said, like, is something that everyone is really interested in, is about finding those connections and dealing with, like, that aspect of shame when you don't have those connections. So could you speak more on that? Because I know, like, you were mentioning, this is your year of female friendships, but that means that 22 years before this was not your year. So let's talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think we both kind of hinted on we had thought that there was something wrong with us personally when these friendships weren't coming along. Um, and I don't blame me or you or anybody that feels that way because it seems like everybody else has those friendships. So if everybody else has those, like then it has to be my problem. But I think just knowing that, you know, knowing who you are in the sense of like that I bring worth to the world. Everybody does. I have value. You know, these are things that I like. These are the things that I'm good at. Um, and that somebody else in this world will platonically appreciate that about me and want to be around me for those things as well. Right. I think that it's better, honestly, looking back now, that I went 22 years without those strong, intense, great female friendships because now that I have it, it's like, okay, that was so worth the wait. Whether you're waiting
Mhm.
10 years, 22 years, some people, honestly, 30 years too. I've met people on the road that it's like, oh my gosh, like I haven't had a good girlfriend until I turned 29 or 30. And it seems so long, but it's like, imagine getting that at 30 and having that for the rest of your life than just like never getting it at all. Um, with the shame piece of it, it's more of like an inner work thing. I can sit here all day long and tell you, oh, it's not shameful to not have friends, it's not whatever. But at the end of the day, it has to come down to you and you knowing exactly what you bring to the table amongst friendships and that people will be lucky to have you as a friend. So I honestly, my tip for myself looking backwards, talking to me at what, 20, 19, 18 would be to learn how to show up for myself so that when these people do show up down the line, whenever they do, I know how I can show up best for them too. So that
Mhm.
I'm not missing out on friendship opportunities or I'm not quote unquote like screwing up as a friend or whatnot. I just know how to show up for me and I know how to show up for that person. So instead of seeing it as shame, just see it as this is a time of being alone. And being alone is very different than being lonely, right? When you're alone, you can work on yourself, you can work on being your own best friend. Um, so that when your potential best friend group comes along, then you can show up for that really well too.
What I was thinking about as you were speaking is, like, we as a society, especially as young people, put so much pressure on romantic relationships and how to get into one and how to, be the perfect girlfriend or the perfect boyfriend, the perfect partner. And we never kind of talk about the power of platonic relationships and everything that you would do as a good partner in a romantic relationship, you need to do as a partner and as a half in a platonic relationship. So when we were talking earlier about, like, asking for help and, like, really being able to connect with yourself, I think that you and I are very similar in the sense that taking that time to be alone, to learn who I am and the value that I bring not only in friendships but in relationships and just me as a person has allowed me to show up a lot more confidently in my relationships period, and also that confidence has attracted other people who are kind of in the same maturity level, like, emotionally, that I am in, who want to connect as deeply with me as I want to connect with them.
100%. You are like so spot on when you talk about the whole we as, just as a generation, we put so much emphasis on like relationships, like romantic relationships and not the platonic relationships. And I feel like now having found the great friendships that I am in, I've almost reversed it into if a romantic partner, a potential romantic partner down the line, right,
Mhm.
cannot show up for me the way that my girls are showing up for me, then I don't know what you're doing in my life. Because if these girls that want nothing from me can show up for me in these great ways, then why are you, who want something from me, right? Whether it's
Mhm.
love, whether it's whatever, something else, it's like you need to step it up. Which is why I think the being alone piece and knowing yourself and knowing your standards piece is so important, because that doesn't go just for romantic relationships. If when you know the standards that you set for yourself and just anybody that comes around you, which, you have more platonic relationships than romantic relationships, I assume, or at least in my life, right? So
Mhm.
whoever I allow in my life closely in that close circle as a friend, I hold those same standards for them as to a romantic relationship. And I think when you do have that standards, then you are, spending a lot more time alone, because you are weeding out quite a lot of people. But then the people that do end up coming in are, are people that are quality and good for you. Um, so that's why I've just reversed that mindset of, I honestly, going even into a romantic relationship, right? I would love to be best friends first before we even explore anything more. Because as friends, they don't want anything from you. They just love you exactly as how you are. Whereas
Mhm.
sometimes in romantic relationships, there's other aspects involved that just make the situation a little bit more, or a little bit less authentic and genuine.
Yes, yes, I completely agree. And I'm just looking at some questions. Something that you reminded me of is you talked about how like you have just moved to Maui, you finished college, and you spent a year and a half on Maui before you kind of had your like crazy travel adventure year. And so I'm wondering what your take is on building strong relationships outside of university and school, especially for someone in a new city who feels like they have no one.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's so funny because school apparently teaches you everything except that, right?
Mhm.
Uh, I feel like in college, it's a shock to so many people that come out of college and move elsewhere and don't stay in their college town, don't stay in their hometown, because for what, 3 years, 4 years, you're honestly forced to have friends. You're given so many people that are just
Yes.
there in class, in school, in the dorms, in the dining rooms, whatnot. But when I had moved out to Maui, I had never been to Maui before, first of all, and I had knew nobody there. But before I'd gone a couple weeks beforehand, like I'm looking for people on social media and
Mhm.
seeing what life is like so far and this and that and the other, because I'm like, oh crap, when I show up, like I want a friend, like I don't want to do everything alone. And so I eventually started following a couple people, whatnot. They'd follow me, and then you just gotta shoot your shot. I think that's where, like, I don't think I've really ever sent too many DMs or, like, shot my shot via the DMs prior to that, but I was like, "Well, I'm just gonna say, 'Hi, my name is Bonnie, like, I'm coming in a couple of weeks, really love your content,'" or just say something nice, like, compliment somebody, and then be like, "Hey, I, like, would love to hang out with you, would love to go get coffee," or, like, "Would love to go to the beach," whatnot, and then I would get some text back and say, "Hey, would love to do that," right? And so once you get there, though, the thing is you can't have cold feet. It's easy
Mhm.
to do the asking, but then it's really hard to actually show up, because it's like, "Oh my gosh, like, I'm anxious about it," but you just have to. I think whether you're going to a new job, a new city, new wherever, you have to put yourself out there, and it's not easy to. But if you don't, like, people aren't just gonna come flocking to you, right? Like, you're not a celebrity, like, you know what I mean? And
Mhm.
so I think that was the beginning of me learning to be comfortable with just putting myself out there, because I realized that nobody was going to come to me if I don't go to them. And then once I got there, right, you meet one person, you meet two people, those people have friends, right? Then
Mhm.
eventually they'll bring you around. But you have to continuously say yes over and over and over again. Even on days sometimes when I was like, oh my gosh, I would just love to lay in bed and not do anything. But if someone's like, oh my gosh, my friends who are going on this hike and I've never been on, and you don't, like, you can't find this hike if they don't take you, do you want to come?
Mhm.
It's like, okay, I'm gonna go, because my priority at that point was to build a community around me. So I think moral of the story is you just got to shoot your shot.
Yeah, and I had a very similar experience as well in London of being like, okay, I'm gonna recognize that the first 3 or 4 months is gonna be socially, emotionally, physically exhausting because I'm gonna say yes more than I'm gonna say no, and I'm not gonna prioritize myself as much as I want to. But it's going to be good because I'm going to set myself a good foundation of people that care about me, a community, and like a home here in this new city that I've never been to, shooting my shot. I also did a couple of like DMs. I had like content creators that I knew in London. And so when I wasn't doing my program yet, I was literally just being like, hey, you want to hang out? Like, let's grab coffee. And I
Yeah.
think that we won't shoot our shot because we're afraid that they're going to say no. 99.9% of the times they're going to say yes. But because we don't ask, all we'll ever get is that no. And so I've just started to ask and, more people than I would have thought would say yes and like let's hang out and let's connect with each other. And if they say no, it's never something about me. I know it's always about their capacity at the time and what they're going through and maybe they're not ready to take on another friendship. It has nothing to do with me specifically.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also feel like I've gotten this comment a few times, um, where people are like, "Well, you are in the social media space. It's so much easier for you to make friends, yada yada. You just kind of like send a DM and somebody's gonna say yes," which I understand where they're coming from. And if you're in this position and you're in this mindset too, maybe you don't want to shoot your shot with DMs. Maybe you don't even have social media, which is totally fine. That doesn't mean that you're not going to have friends. That doesn't mean that there's no ways of you making friends. I'd say show up to community things. For example,
Mhm.
like a well-known cafe in the area. Or I know for myself, like I love being in the gym. I love workouts. Go to like a workout class, right? Whether it's Pilates, whether it's a spin class or whatnot, show up a little bit earlier and just like say hi to the girl next to you or say hi to the person next to you on the bike. And,
Mhm.
if they end up sparking out a conversation, they might be like, hey, you want to go get coffee after this? Boom, you
Mhm.
just set yourself on a little front date, right? Like it doesn't have to be this whole, oh my gosh, I need to have a social media presence. I need to, look great. No, you literally just show up as a human being to a cafe, say hi to somebody, but in that moment, you also do have to put yourself out there because I promise you, if you show up to Pilates and you just sit in the corner by yourself, no one's really going to come up to you to talk to you. You're going to have to be the more outgoing one, even though it's a little bit uncomfortable. But at the same time, kind of killing two birds with one stone. It's like when you put yourself out there more and more and more, you get more and more comfortable doing that. And then
Mhm.
before you know it, it's going to be so easy for you just to walk up to somebody or go travel alone and be like, I got this. Like I know how to talk to people and I know how to make friends and I'm not scared.
I agree, and that's kind of what I was experiencing in London is like I am a total introvert. I don't think people realize that. Like I would rather be alone. But I'm realizing more and more maybe it's because I'm living in a city, maybe it's because I'm like getting more comfortable with who I am and myself that I'm like I can also go up and just say hi and like have no expectations of like whether or not they like me or whatever. I just go give someone a compliment or be like I loved your vibe writing next to you. And that's actually how I made one of my really good friends in London is through Soul Cycle and through Spin. And I talk about that a little bit is like you go up, you show up in places with people who will have a like mind, like the same mindset as you. So if you really love working out and that's like your whole shtick, go make friends at a workout class.
Yeah.
If you love reading, go to a library, go to a bookstore, go up to those types of people. Like you're going to find your people in areas where they're doing like the same sort of things. So don't go to a rock concert expecting to make friends that like, really suit your vibe if you don't like rock. And I really had to do that in London is like I want to make friends in very specific areas because I know that we're going to connect because I know that like the friends that I want to make, check XYZ box. Like they're interested in mental health, they like working out and they like taking care of themselves. Boom, Soul Cycle. That is literally the shtick of Soul Cycle. So that was like how I was able to make friends. Again, is just like compliment someone with no expectations of anything, but also don't be afraid to put yourself out there and be the one to ask, let's go get coffee. And it, whatever happens, happens.
Yeah, I'm a total believer in like the universe has its plan for you, whether like you're religious or not. It's just like when things are meant to happen, right time, right place, it's going to happen. You can't force, especially with something kind of tying back to like the connection. You cannot force connection, whether it's with a friend, whether it's with a romantic person. It's just if it's there, it's there. It's always that if you know kind of feeling.
Mhm.
Or the when you know kind of feeling. So yeah, you're right, Katie. Like also coming from a bit of like a like a sales background, um if you get a no, it's not the end of the world. The world's not going to stop spinning. No rock's going to
Mhm.
come out of the sky and like kill you. There's just going to be a no, and you're like, okay, well, now I know this person doesn't want to be friends. Perfect. I'll go to the next person.
Mhm.
Eventually someone's going to say yes.
Now we've talked about, not having friends, how to make them, how to show up as yourself. Let's talk a little bit about comparison, especially
Yep.
in female friendships. I think that everyone says, if you can survive being a girl in high school, you can survive anything because high school is maybe the most brutal thing that anyone has to go through as a teenager. And comparison, jealousy, friendships, vulnerability, it